I was going to ask you a question, Dan.
I want to explain why that works. Why an offensive and a double envelopment works. Because Draco, when you have launching an offensive, now Russia is learning that they actually need a very stable front line, right? So their base, where they're pushing their pincers out from, that is basically the regular Russian army holding a front, and then they get to move these units. And so definitely Russia is learning, hey, we can't advance without a base. And when you have these double envelopments happening, if the base is not ready to support the flanks, then it's impossible. So tying up with what Vaughn was saying, all these different areas are being double enveloped, they're being flanked, and Ukraine has to choose. And I want to give this this thought to you guys. Let's imagine that Ukraine actually succeeds in countering Bakhmut, the envelopment in Bakhmut. Then what? You know what I'm saying? Then what? So that's a question that they have to think. Then what are they going to do? Let's just imagine.
It's on to Moscow. Vaughn, if I can ask Dan a question about this strategy. Like I have first of all, I'll make a statement, which is that we have very bad data on casualties. Like we can guess what the casualties are, but we don't really know what the casualties are. But one thing I would say is that Russia's stated objective is to destroy the Ukrainian military, to get them to surrender. They want to demilitarize Ukraine. So they've been focusing on attacking the military. When I see these double envelopments, what I see is the Russians are putting themselves in a position to shell Ukrainians, right? Because the Ukrainians have to resupply their pockets. And the Russians are putting them in a position where they can get reconnaissance and they can drop shell fire on the Ukrainians. But I don't know how effective it is. We had the pro-Ukrainian panel saying that the Ukrainians are killing 3 and 7 Russians for every 1 Ukrainian. I don't understand how that's possible, because it's not like the Russians are doing human wave offensives and failing. They're very carefully, as Dan said, developing double envelopments, right? Which, as I see it, is putting them in a position to snipe at the supply columns. The Russians won't want to waste shells just shelling people who are underground and protected. I don't know how effective the Russians are at killing Ukrainians, but I kind of suspect that they're getting good at it. Like, they've been at it a long time. So Dan, is the idea to just like squeeze and hurt the Russians, the Ukrainians, until the Ukrainian military cries uncle?
Yeah, so you have to imagine.
There was an article.
I'm going to
just give you an introduction situation. There is an article today in most of the German newspapers that the Ukrainians are having really big time in finding new conscripts, and they never had to force people before because there was so many volunteers, and now they are forcing people because the deaths in Bakhmut are huge. And this is the first time I see the official press saying something like this. Sorry, go on, Dan, go on.
1 second, somebody's vibrating.
Yeah, but
so I want to answer the total. My boy. So the way the double envelopment works and why it's working so good right now is because you know that the line is so massive, right? When you're a troop on the ground and you're being enveloped, you don't know. So a lot of these people didn't even know that they were being surrounded. In a lot of these cities, these pincer movements are so large and so vast in the distance that when it starts to close, it plays a psychological effect on them. Not only are they getting shelled, but now they're hearing, wow, we're actually outflanked. And this
so they're trapped.
Yes, they're trapped, but they're not aware that they're trapped until it's becoming far too hard to get out of that encirclement. Now, I wanted to just let you guys know that there's a flanking maneuver, which is where Russia originally was coming into Ukraine with one line, and that did not work at all. They adjusted, guys. This is something that they stopped doing. Why? Because they weren't being supported by a base and another flank. When you add that extra flank, you're adding basically an extra force that can support your parallel force.
Psychological.
It's not only psychological, but you have a kill zone in the middle. Now your troops are being supported by 2 flanks, and this is an immense power up in your forces' morale, in your forces' effectiveness. So what we're seeing now is something that the Russians have now turned on, a switch turned on in their military, and this is the go-to strategy because they take less casualties on their side. They have to risk less. And I want to just say one last thing before I shut up. If you guys know World War II history, it was called island hopping in the Pacific, where the United States said, you know what, we're not going to attack this island, we're going to attack this island. This is what Russia is doing. They're basically island hopping in a major scale on land, choosing cities which they will surround, and some cities they'll bypass. Why? Because some cities lead to other cities. Like if you watch the Defense Politics Asia and you see his mapping, they're basically fingers that are grabbing and closing other areas. And this is the most effective form of fighting for the Russians right now.
But troops on the ground can't see what's happening strategically on the map, but then surely somebody does, right? Like surely the commanders know what's going on.
Depends if
Only until it's too late in some cases.
It's not like they don't know.
When you
it's
don't
not like
have
they
a
don't
war
know what's
commanded
happened
by...
with them. So if we look at also this strategy with encircling, is not like it is not unbreakable. There are a lot of examples in the history of war where you see that also encirclements can be break and can be defeated. The problem is that I think that Ukraine don't have enough resources to do that. So they are announcing now that they have 80,000 troops in front of Bakhmut. But I think that is just propaganda, because if they would have 80,000 troops with tanks, with artillery, with everything what they need to have there to make a counter attack, then they would do this counter attack. They wouldn't wait 3 more weeks until the Russian take Bakhmut, and then, because if the Russian take Bakhmut, they will take 10,000 of Ukrainian troops prisoners.
Yes, Draco, you're very right. But think once, what if they are also being held back? Okay, they don't have, but we have noticed like Ukraine sometimes do things where they are still not prepared to do. So I think there is another dimension behind it we always forget, which is we need a narrative for the Western countries in order to keep supplying weapons, in order to keep giving money, in order to maintain the whole story running, the show running. And that's one of the things we have to understand. They need a narrative. They need to do it when it works also with the Western countries. They are saying now they are not ready to. You said you were ready. Today they were saying they were not ready because they don't have enough people. You see, Draco, who is saying who? It's very difficult. I think I have the feeling that
I'm talking about the facts, Prata.
Yeah,
I'm talking about the
it's
facts.
also fact. But Draco, it's also facts. I'm giving you right. I'm just saying that. The thing is that they are never ready until the West needs, the Western narrative needs you to be ready. And that's what we have seen many times. They are not.
What I think is that the Ukrainians might have the number of troops there. They don't have the heavy equipment. That's what I think is happening.
That
so,
might be also.
I heard the 80,000 came from Prigozhin, the number. I'm not sure. I see it on Twitter. That's what they say. Because I haven't seen Ukraine stuff, the updates over the past 24 hours because I was busy. But if let's say assuming that the 80,000 is there, they just most likely they are lacking heavy equipment. The tanks and the IFVs are still on the way. It's pretty far from the western front, from the western border. So it might take some time. And then they probably only have the Leopard 2s in, and that's probably less than 20 of them. So the Leopard 1s are not ready. The Abrams are not ready. The interesting thing is nobody talks about the French AMX-10. That is a very interesting thing. Nobody talks about it, but it's actually a decent weapon as well. I mean, he has a proper gun. He can kill tank, I guess. So RL is muted, and then Wagner also made a very interesting point is that they're trying to urge the Russian defense, Russian military to do something, to push to do more. it seems and then the Prigozhin warns about the counteroffensive, so they tell the Russians to quickly do more. And I think the Russian military is actually waiting to see what the Ukrainians going to do. Because if you do first, then you lose the initiative. You lose the initiative because then the Ukrainians know what you can do. Then they can actually counter you. So the Russian military is like, okay, let the Wagner go and do whatever they want, and then they got to wait and see what the Ukrainians can do. I got to suspect, that's what's happening.
Wait,
These
and
numbers-
damn.
these numbers, the
I just wanted to
80,000
ask you a thing. Last week I asked you guys if you see Bakhmut encirclement like a killing weapon that is being so productive in killing militaries, and why people are expecting Russia to close the encirclement. And my point was, no, they were not going to close the encirclement. They're going to keep it open as much as they can, keep bringing Ukrainians inside, keep telling them there is still a hope. They will.
No, strategically, it's not good to enclose the encirclement anyways. You have way too many, strategically, it's a bad idea because now you are going to have to fight two fronts. And the line on the other side of Bakhmut would be so thin that then the Ukrainians could do a successful counterattack. So you don't want to close that. Fighting right now on the flanks and closing that line would be catastrophic. Actually closing that line, you would just lose that force at the end. So it's not only because it's not that Russia wants to keep it open, it's because Russia can't close it and it's strategically not the right thing to do.
You're right, Dan. But that's number that I said. It seems that they have 80,000 troops with 300 tanks and 200 artillery and some helicopters and some other are from military summary. And he said that he had these numbers from Ukraine, not from Russia.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah.
So that's what I heard. So I didn't check these numbers.
I also heard that, not from him, but just through reading.
Yeah. So
pro-Ukrainian
sources. But if that's true, that for me it would be logical if we see that the Wagners are the assault troops, and that's clear. Also in Avdiivka as also in Bakhmut, then it would be for me logical if we take as a fact that the Russian army is backing now the Wagners and is standing behind them in case of the counterattack of the Ukrainian, and then they would intervene because only the Wagners are not capable to hold this front against a big army of the Ukraine, which is making a counterattack. I don't think that that's possible because they are too few. They are not enough. The Wagners totally are like 50,000. So it's.
Can you guys hear the Russian national anthem?
Sorry?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, it plays every morning. Every morning here in Russia. We have to do a moment of silence.
That's
wondered
also
what you were up to.
fantastic.
I thought Dan's lost his mind. He's standing.
Oh, it's on the radio. Okay. Yeah, on the radio, that's normal. I mean, we
I
have
don't
that in Singapore
understand
as well.
Russian. I'm sorry. I don't understand the language. So it's for me.
No, I think for real. No, in Singapore we also have the same thing. Every I think 7 a.m. or 6 a.m. The radio will start to play the national anthem, like every channel. I think maybe every channel. I'm not sure,
Same.
but some channels.
Draco, Velikaya Strana, the great land.
Oh,
Fuck them. I don't like Russians.